Hello. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the final few big postures in this month's live online class sequence. So I'll be walking you through the progressions of Garudasana, eagle pose, a version of Vashistasana, side plank, and then moving into Pigeon Pose, Eka Pada Rajakapotasana. Okay, so first we're going to look at the progression towards eagle pose, Garudasana. Okay. So the first thing we're going to visit is an easy chair pose, palm center of chest, where we bring the legs in together. Now with eagle pose, part of what's going to be important is the sense of your thigh bones rolling in. Now, the more your thigh bones roll in, the more your sitting bones likely flare, and it can feel a little bit like you're arching your back. Okay, so we kind of moderate, right? We don't want to create too much arc, but we do want to have the sense that there's a little bit of relaxing of the inner thighs and the thigh bones rolling in. Okay, so the first progression will be to bring the right ankle, right heel towards the left ankle. So you're just lifting the foot up a little bit and squeezing it in. Okay, and right away, just sense what turns on in that left side. So I definitely feel it kind of around my sitting bone, the glutes. I'm trying to maintain a little bit of a long spine even as I sit back here. Okay, and then you can try it on the left side. So shifting the weight, lifting up through that left heel, and trying to squeeze it in and almost roll the inner thighs back. Now we keep the chest nice and lifted. That's part of Garudasana here. And then step it down and stand. Okay, second progression, we're going to bring our arms wide into a cactus shape. And the cactus shape is to get that sense of broadness through the upper back. And then you're going to cross your right elbow over left. Right elbow over left. Now, as you do this, if this is really, really uncomfortable or challenging, or you just like this variation, you might give yourself a hug and start to work towards elbows coming in. Okay, if that's a little bit too much, you could have hands on your elbows and just kind of create this little shelf here. But what we're trying to do is draw the energy in towards our plumb line. Okay, so elbows want to try to meet. And then if it feels comfortable, the backs of the palms are going to meet. If that feels okay, the fronts of palms are going to meet. So I'm going to wrap my hands one more time. I've kind of made this spiral flame looking gesture with my arms. Now, what can help stabilize this is to feel like you're pulling your elbows apart and lifting the elbows up towards the chest, broadening the upper back. Okay, and then we're going to sit into that little chair pose, so feet close together. Okay. So eagle is all about finding the plumb line, really finding that kind of internal and upward energy. Okay, so really coming in and up towards yourself. And so with the right elbow on top, we want the opposite thigh on top. So it's going to be our left thigh. Now you could do the same variation we just did, which is to just lift the left heel, or internally rotating those thighs, crossing the knee over the right. Now, naturally, my right knee is going to come in a little bit. I'm going to provide a little bit of pressure, pushing out into that left calf here. Some of us might be able to wrap our left foot around. Mine can't do that very easily, so I'm just going to let it float there. Okay, so I have my right arm on top, left thigh on top. From the side, I have my chest lifted even as I'm sitting back. And I'm gazing towards the crease of my elbows here, so that the back of my neck is nice and long. Okay. And so we're mainly going to be working with this. If you want, in class, as an option, in the final couple moments, you could fold over the thigh. Okay, but eventually we're going to unfold and step back into a high lunge. So just making sure that you kind of know that that's coming next. Okay, let's try this on the other side. So we've got feet together, elbows wide into that cactus shape. And then we're going to cross left elbow over right. So left elbow over right. Sorry, I'm not mirroring you properly. But locate which one is your right and your left. Left elbow over right. Again, we could do that hugging action. If this doesn't work so much, holding onto the elbows. Okay, but if you get there pretty comfortably, then you can take the backs of the palms to one another, maybe wrapping fronts of palms. Gently pulling the elbows apart and lifting up through the elbows and a bit forward. Okay, you come into a relatively shallow chair pose to start, really emphasizing the lift up of the chest. Now, if left elbow is on top, right thigh is going to come on top. Okay, so if you don't feel comfortable doing thigh, just pick the foot up and balance here. Otherwise, we cross the thighs over one another, internally rotating the thighs so that we can kind of relax into this position a little bit more. Once you feel pretty steady, you can start to provide a little bit of resistance, maybe pressing that standing knee out, activating the outer thigh. Gaze towards the crease of the elbows. Don't worry about your foot, just having a sense of drawing in and up. And then if you feel comfortable and you want to try folding the upper spine, go right ahead. Woo. From here, we'll unfurl and step back into a high lunge. Okay, and then release. All right, so that's eagle, right? A very in and up and kind of bound position. And then we're gonna go into Vashistasana side plank. So I mentioned we're gonna step back into high lunge. So feel free to step your left foot back to start. Okay, we're in high lunge. Now I want you to take that left hand down to the mat and nice and wide. Okay, start to lean the upper spine back. So revisiting the twist that we looked at in our standing sequence video. Here's where you're gonna heel toe that foot halfway down the mat like you did in the warm-up. Okay, so my toe is turning open. That's giving me room for my pelvis to start to turn. And then you'll notice my back foot, I'm rolling onto the blade edge of my foot for this side plank. Okay, you can always put the knee down if you'd rather be here. That's more appropriate. Notice my bottom shoulder, I'm not collapsing into it. But for some of us, this might be really comfortable, and then we might, I'm gonna adjust my mat. Then we might stack the feet for Vashistasana, or a version of. Remember, there's no hierarchy. This is just something to play with. And then we'll take downward facing dog. So we'll look at that on the other side, coming all the way up to standing. Okay, this time step your right foot back. And then we take the right hand down to the ground, nice and wide. So it is about wide, and maybe a bit forward of your shoulder. Okay. So that as you heel toe that left foot halfway down the mat, you start to roll the body open. You start to bear a little bit more weight into that bottom hand. You start to roll to the blade edge of your foot. If you're not going there, the knee comes down. If you are going there, maybe staying here, maybe playing with stacking the feet. Okay, but you have options. Remember, all that work in leaning the upper spine back comes into play here. And then we take downward facing dog. Shaking the head out. Okay, so we've looked at Garudasana eagle, Vashistasana side plank. Now we move into Pigeon Pose, Eka Pada Rajakapotasana. And so I want you to come back to the pinwheel shape that we visited in the warm-up video. So if you haven't looked at the warm-up video, I highly recommend that you click on it below. And so I'll show you again from the front. We've got our right shin forward, left knee out to the side, remembering that we're working towards a shin that is parallel with the front edge of your mat, and also the ability to drop that sitting bone down to open the inner thigh. Okay, we're going to come back to this forward movement that we did, where we bowed forward over our leg from the hip. And in a moment, I'll show you from the side. But if you want to give it a go, you didn't in the first round, and you want to try this round, try doing it with no hands, or maybe just one hand down. And as you go down, you can imagine you're lifting the shin towards you. And as you come up, pushing the shin away, support. Okay, so I'm going to show you this from the side. We'll do 2 more together. Okay, so as I go forward, notice my bum is picking up and my spine is staying pretty long. And I'm not dropping the chest. Okay, and then for pigeon, you have the option of just walking the hands forward, coming down into this forward fold. You could also pick your body up and start to reach that leg back. Now, of course, there's lots of variations along the way. If you feel like you could send that thigh back a little bit, right, my knee moving back and then come forward, you could try this. But the other version is to lift, turn that thigh in, and then lengthen the leg all the way. Okay? This might actually feel more comfortable for the hip, but if it's too big of a movement, you could take that first little variation I did where I just moved my thigh back a touch, starting to move towards this hip opening. Okay? Now, you might like to try working towards a parallel shin, a shin parallel to the front edge of your mat. That might be too intense for your hip. So you always have permission to slide that foot in a touch so that the heel is moving more towards your groin. Okay, you can also keep the back toe tucked if that's more supported, otherwise letting it relax. Okay, and then we're going to walk our hands. Drop the top of the head. Take just 2 or 3 breaths with me. Sensing what you can let go of into the earth. And as you make your way all the way back up, you might experiment with seeing if you can bring the spine all the way up. Right, recalling that first movement we did where we had our fists and we were extending the arms out in the warm-up video before switching to the other side. So a good counter to this might be to lift that right thigh back, open the hip. I always like that as a counter pose. So I'll show you that on the left side, from the side. Okay, remembering that our support, whatever our support is, a brick, a couple of pillows, underneath the left hip. Whichever shin is forward, that's where the support is. Okay, I find my pinwheel first, and again, I'm working towards being able to sit up tall in this position. That's where the work really is. It's not so much about getting the deepest stretch through the hips, although that's part of doing pigeon. But with this work this month, what I want us to start to get is more comfortable with finding a long spine and a lengthened low back and 2 sitting bones rooting down whilst we're sitting on the floor. Okay, so once you have your pinwheel set up, you can have your hands down, maybe a couple of fingers. Otherwise, taking one or both hands off as you bow forward. Notice I'm moving from the hip. Dropping the sitting bones as I arrive back up. Feeling like I'm lifting my shin towards my chest as I go down, pressing that shin away as I come back up. One more like this. Okay, and then I'm going to bow forward into my pigeon pose, so I could stay in pinwheel. I could play with moving that thigh back a little bit, still keeping the hip open. Or I could lift my body up, internally rotate that back thigh, and start to scoot the knee back. And as I get into this sort of more extended pose, bringing the heel towards my groin might help a little bit. Okay. And then bowing forward over the leg. We'll take 3 or 4 breaths together. I want to say that if as you come towards the ground, a lot of rounding happens, or the breath starts to get constricted, prop something underneath your forehead or even your hands. You could stack your fists and rest the forehead. That's an option. And then walking the hands all the way up. One last time to practice bringing the spine upright. It might not be possible, and that's okay, but you're just working towards it. And then downward facing dog. And you can take any kind of counter stretch with this. So I like to lift that same thigh that I brought forward, lift it up and back and open the hip. And then walk your hands back towards your feet, roll on up to standing. All right, so that was our 3 sort of major final postures that we'll be visiting in class this month. If you have any questions, do let me know. If you haven't already visited the standing sequence where I go over the nuts and bolts of our standing postures, or the warm-up sequence where I introduce this pinwheel shape and do a few preparatory exercises, please do. They're linked below. And don't forget to click subscribe if you'd like to be notified when I upload new videos each month. Okay, I hope to see you in a live class soon, which you can also book below. And until then, take care.